Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
Hey friends, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Fitness CEO Podcast. If you are new to this channel, my name is Bryce Henson. I am your Fitness CEO. And today we are going to mix it up a bit. So I'm very excited for this episode, which is the first style of episode we're doing in this fashion. And being an entrepreneur, I seek inspiration from people that inspire me, from people that go for their dreams, that have an underdog, but also an overcome mindset. And the movie Rudy, which was released back in 1993, which I can barely believe is well over 30 years ago, was really inspiring me and one of my favorite movies in my youth. And there's a lot of mindset and leadership lessons that we're going to derive from this. So we're going to walk along and really pick out some of my favorite clips in the film and give you a little leadership breakdown on what to look for. So follow along and let's get inspired.
After high school, I'm going to play football at Notre Dame.
So this is kind of one of the first opening scenes of the movie, and this is just common in leadership, right? Someone has a vision, in this case Rudy does, he's a little boy, and he wants to play for Notre Dame. Now, his brother was giving him a hard time, and his siblings, which is just, happens, but really from a disappointing perspective, his father, really kind of encouraged, his family to mock him, if you will, and definitely did not support his dream. And I think when you look at it from a leadership perspective, and I'm specifically referring to his father here, you don't want to, give your team or you're following a false illusion they're going to be successful. But at the same token, especially if someone on your team, has a dream, has a goal, has an ambition, from my perspective, very, very poor leadership, especially the father, just to kind of laugh it off, give his son a hard time, especially, it was a big dream and the reality and the probability is probably pretty small in the grand scheme of things. But from a leadership lens, you want to be lifting your people up and creating space versus, squashing their dreams, because that's going to have an adverse reaction and really create low morale for your team. I certainly can relate to this in many ways. Just meaning that I had an absent father. Now, Rudy, in this particular clip, his dad is there. In my particular situation, my father wasn't there to be able to provide that encouragement that I wanted and needed. So it is what it is. Sometimes this happens in life. So while it was a poor display of leadership from his father, from my perspective, at the end of the day, circumstance does not change responsibility. If Rudy has that dream, that passion, that goal, it's going to be up for him, even though his family and specifically his father isn't supportive. And the one last thing that I wanted to share, which is a really good, important point, and sometimes this is just a factor installed in human nature, the people that are closest to you, that love you the most, they have the best intentions for you, and many times they just don't want to see you fail because that creates disappointment. And, you can look at this, from my lens, it was poor leadership from his father's perspective. But at the end of the day, he was also probably trying not to set his son up for failure and disappointment. And I remember one of the first conversations I had with my mother, my dear mother, who I love and adore, and she has the best interest, she has the best intentions for me. But when I told her I was going to launch Fit Body Bootcamp back in 2012, her first reaction was, well, Bryce, who's going to pay for something like that? And it was hard to stomach in the moment, but I realized, in hindsight, even though it wasn't what I wanted to hear, it came from a good place, but I just had to really look internally and realize just because my family, my mom in this particular case, doesn't seem like she's supporting me, she's really just looking out for my best interest and doesn't want to see me fail. But at the end of the day, I still have the duty, obligation, responsibility to follow my dreams.
Whoa, wait. Where are you going?
Mixed feelings from a leadership perspective specific to this clip. And first and foremost, very bad leadership and poor leadership. To be able to call someone out and really, even though it probably wasn't intentional, the feedback was very condescending. It was like, hey, do you have friends here? He was very, very clear, not only from a verbal perspective, but also of his body language as well, that Rudy was not cut out to, go to University of Notre Dame. And he delivered that feedback in a pretty condescending way, which is never good. And it reminds me of a time, my young leadership, I was leading a team meeting, and my intention was good. In fairness, I was blindsided. There was a new teammate that was invited to the meeting by one of my other leaders and was there to be able to provide feedback. And in fairness, the expectation wasn't strong, but there was a couple things that just weren't presented well from my perspective in the moment. And instead of allowing that person to save face a bit, I leaned into it and I gave him pretty direct feedback. And it came from a level of frustration. I think intentionality is so important. So when I rewind that tape, for me, there was a huge opportunity to still be able to get that feedback, but not coming from a frustration or condescending place, to come from like a loving place and trying to come from a helpful place. And I think that's really, really important and a missed opportunity in my own leadership that I just used as the example, but also to the priest here. So on one hand, the front part of it, big opportunity for better leadership. On the flip side, there was a step in the right direction in the sense that once the conversation ensued, then the priest asked someone else to help out the rest of the students get on the bus who were behind Rudy, and he pulled Rudy aside-ish. I mean, it's a movie. He could have probably pulled him way more to the side in a private setting, away from being earshot within his fellow teammates, or his fellow classmates, I should say, but was able to provide that feedback, just kind of giving Rudy the insight that, hey, Rudy, in order to get into Notre Dame, your scores and your grades need to be far superior than they are now. And that's a spirit of good leadership. You want to be able to shoot your following straight, give them feedback they need, but also to uplift them as well. And there's a famous adage that I really buy into in leadership. Whenever you're praising, you need to praise lavishly, you need to praise early and often. You need to do that in public as well, because that really inspires people and lifts people up. Now, the opposite is also true. When you're being able to provide constructive feedback, you want to do that in private, because from an emotional perspective, you want to be able to deliver that feedback, that constructive criticism in private, not to embarrass that other person. That's really, really important. And really, the priest did that kind of in the second half, so I'm going to give him, a more positive remark there. But big picture, some mixed feedback in terms of, some negative feedback, or some mixed feedback in the sense of there's a big opportunity at the very beginning not to be condescending when you give feedback. The silver lining was he did pull Rudy aside and was able to provide that constructive feedback in more private setting, which again, you should be able to praise in public, but be able to provide that constructive feedback in private.
If I don't go now, I'll never be any good for you, or for me, or anybody.
All right, so this clip is still at the very, kind of beginning part of the film, and this is after one of Rudy's friends dies in a, work accident. And again, Rudy's big dream and vision is to, go to University of Notre Dame, which is this prestigious school, clearly, but the Rudiger family are more blue-collar in nature. So after he graduated high school, he went off and worked at the mill, and sadly, unfortunately, someone died. One of his friends died on the job in an explosive fire. And at that point, it was a very pivotal moment in the movie, because that traumatic situation, that really was the catalyst for Rudy to make this decision to think to himself, what am I waiting for? Like, life is temporary. Life is fleeting. I need to act now. And I think that's a really powerful learning lesson in life and leadership, that sometimes tragedies can actually be blessings in disguise, because they can really shine a light on the temporariness of life. And because of that, it can really get people to take action, to follow their dreams and passions, and really pursue good things in life. So there's a lot of value from that really challenging situation. And, I think in life, challenges can either make or break people. And for me, I'll give you an example of my own life. One of my worst moments in life had to do with alcohol. I'm a recovering alcoholic, if you're new to the show and not fully familiar. And through a family situation, seeing, heartache of one of my family members struggle with alcohol and all the issues and the challenges in a very, dramatic fashion. And it was a very low moment. It was one of the lowest moments in my life. And through that low moment, it really gave me a lot of clarity to make a better decision for myself to remove alcohol and really change the course and trajectory of my life. So similar to Rudy in this film, this tragic event decided to he created inspiration, made that decision to move forward. So there's a lot of value in that from an inspiration, a leadership lens. But then the latter part of the scene, he's shooting off to South Bend, and I think they live somewhere in the Chicago area. South Bend's probably a couple hours away by bus, and he's taking a Greyhound bus to try to figure it out and move to South Bend and try to make an attempt to go to the University of Notre Dame. Dame, and his dad was with him at that final scene. And storytelling, by the way, is a very effective tool in leadership, and it can really, help persuade, inspire someone. In this particular case, again, now this is a movie, and one of my favorite movies based off a true story, but of course they're thickening the plot from that perspective, so it's important to keep that in mind. But really, it was a very poor display of leadership for his father to really squash his dreams again, showcased a story of his father, who had been Rudy's grandpa, who migrated to this country for a better life, and ultimately had to work through the depression, and then invested in some cattle, and unfortunately just things didn't work out per plan. So his dad kind of showcased the fact that, hey, sometimes following your dreams actually creates heartache and hardship for you and your loved ones. So again, in this particular situation, storytelling is a good framework and fabric of leadership, but to do it in a way to really not inspire your following and really put them down, from my perspective, is really just a very challenging and poor leadership.
I want to go to school at Notre Dame.
Hoorah! Man, this clip fires me up. It's my first one of this particular leadership breakdown that things are moving in the right direction from a leadership lens. Of course, the story and the plot is building, but to give you some insight, Rudy shows up in South Bend and really is connecting with some administrators of the university, including a priest here. And there's an incredible sense of leadership from both of them. And take a step back, my framework of leadership, there's 3 pillars. Number 1, you need to be able to lead yourself before then you can lead your family, which is the second pillar of leadership, and then before you can lead an empire. And Rudy is just kind of talking and showcasing to the priest that, hey, he's been told no and listening to all these naysayers throughout his life, but now's the time for him to break the chains and really to make something of himself. And good on him for just showing up and trying to figure it out, taking that next step. So he puts himself on a bus, a Greyhound bus, gets to the University of Notre Dame, is talking with this priest, this priest was incredible display of leadership, because relationships are built from leadership. I should say relationships are a foundation for strong leadership. And Rudy inherently knows this, wants to create a relationship, create a connection, and he does that. And the priest gives him some time. And also, Rudy shows up with belief in himself. He's very visible and vocal about, maybe some self-limiting beliefs, but he's very vocal and active that this is the time he wants to, really go after his dreams. And the priest connects with him and does an incredible act of leadership by listening to him, by feeling him. You can really feel the energy. And really, when your following feels understood, even if you don't go in the direction they want to, when they feel understood and they feel heard, you'll have influence, and that's really, really strong leadership, which leads to strong teamwork. So the priest does that, which is really, really strong. The second thing he does, which I absolutely love, and I learned this from Nick Saban, one of the best college football coaches of all time, or the best of all time, who's one of the best leaders of all time, always promised his players opportunity, but nothing more than that. And in this particular case, because Rudy established a relationship with the priest was able to give him or provide him an opportunity to go to Holy Cross Junior College, which is the junior college right across the street from Notre Dame in South Bend, and gives him the opportunity. But he makes no promises, and that's really strong leadership. You should never make any promise to recruit, especially if you're bringing someone in or showcasing a vision, but also let them know that the opportunity is there, assuming it is. And that's what he did. And he really extended the olive branch. As you can see, Rudy is going to take that and going to run with it. And again, from a leadership lens, incredibly strong leadership, to have belief in yourself, to create connection, to build a strong relationship. Then from the priest perspective, to really hear Rudy out so he feels heard, and then give him nothing more than an opportunity. And as we'll find out, Rudy takes it.
Have I done all I can?
So in this particular clip, Rudy is starting to excel. He's gaining momentum. He's stacking some wins. Things are happening. He's connecting with the priest, connecting, building a strong relationship, which is a tenet of good leadership. He's also asking for guidance, having a white belt mentality, and accepting coaching, being open to the feedback. So a lot of good things are starting to pop. But as you can see towards the end of the clip, Rudy at Junior Holy Cross goes out and gets the mail, and he's looking for, the letter, his admission letter from from University of Notre Dame, and unfortunately hits another hurdle in the fact that Notre Dame did not accept him. So as you would imagine, he's frustrated, and you can see a somber look in his face. But the fact of the matter is this is life. This is adversity. This is leadership. Not everything is going to go your way. As a leader, you have to understand it's about dealing with adversity. It's about getting knocked down, but then standing right back up again. There's a famous adage: fall down 7, get up 8, and that's what you need to do to be a successful business person, entrepreneur, and leader within your organization. And that reminds me of a time when I first started my Fit Body journey back in 2012. And, it was a big lift and hurdle to do all the research that I needed to do to gain the institutional knowledge about Fit Body, reaching out to a dozen other franchise partners who had been in the brand. So, things were starting to happen for me. I signed my franchise agreement. I got awarded my territory, and I found what I thought was going to be the perfect spot, literally like good destination, storefront. There was just a lot of things happening, and I was really, really excited. This was going to be the perfect spot. And as it turns out, when I filed the application to the city for my certificate of occupancy, or my CUP, if you will, or COO, if you will, and they have to get CUPs and different permits. Unfortunately, the city came back with a decline. They unfortunately would not permit that building, which I thought was going to be the perfect building, perfect lease for my first Fit Body location. And unfortunately, the city declined that. And as you would imagine, I was frustrated, I was upset, but I fell down 7 and I got up 8 and continued to take action. As it turns out, about a month later, I found the location, which was really the location of my dreams. And I didn't know this at the time, but it was actually a benefit or a blessing in disguise because I was still relatively new to the area. But the building that I initially had seen that I thought was going to be the winner was, it turns out, as I got to know the area more, there's a lot of congestion, and the roads, the way they worked, there's a big backup of cars. It would have been actually a logistical nightmare for my clients to get in and out of the parking lot. And I saw the density, so I thought, okay, there's going to be a lot of movement. But in hindsight, it was actually a blessing that first building did not work out, because it opened up the opportunity. So my call to action is, if you're watching this, take a playbook from Rudy. You're going to experience loss. You're going to experience heartache. You're going to experience adversity. But it's not about what happens. It's about your response to it. And if you can pick yourself back up off the mats and keep pushing forward, good things are on the horizon.
Is there anything about 620, please?
Boom! My man Rudy just got accepted to the University of Notre Dame, and we're about over halfway done with the film. So things are kind of building, and he's put in so much work, so much determination to get the desired outcome. And it reminds me of me, why I love this movie. I've always considered myself an underdog. And, now I'm nearly 6 foot, 180 pounds, really good shape, etc. It was not always the case. In fact, growing up, I was the runt. I was the smallest guy on my team. If you looked at the freshman lacrosse team, the freshman soccer team, the freshman football team, it's like, where's Bryce? It's the smallest guy on the field. And Rudy, in this particular film, is, I think, 5'1". And that's actually how the actor is. And that's why they picked him. But he is the underdog. So I love that story, the story of determination, of falling down 7, getting up 8, continuing to move forward. Is just a really, really good message. It also kind of shows that Rudy left no stone unturned, continuing to seek mentorship and guidance from the priest, who is able to provide him wisdom and guidance, and also inspiration to keep going back to the well, which he did. So really inspiring moment of the film. And it's also good to celebrate your wins. And this is something that, as an entrepreneur, many of us don't do, myself included. We have big visions and big goals that we take action on, which is a good thing. And sometimes it's okay to take a step back and realize, yes, I got it. I want to celebrate this. I want to feel this, which Rudy did. But also knowing that that time will also come and go. And then once that time fades and you celebrate and you lean into the celebration, then it's time to pick up those bootstraps and continue to get to work, my friend. And that's what Rudy is about to do.
Let me tell it to you as clean as I can.
All right, copy that. This clip we just watched, one of the, I guess, special team coaches, or one of the field coaches, if you will, being able to provide guidance to the quote-unquote walk-ons. And now, if you can believe, Rudy in this particular film, which is based on a true story, which is freaking wild, fires me up, the underdog mentality. This is what I have and possess to this day. But it's inspiring, this particular speech, of course, the movie, etc. But I love it for so many reasons. Number one, it's just good leadership and coaching. While it was really tough news for that positional coach to lay down to the walk-ons, if you will, the fact of the matter is he set clear expectations. Guys, the reality of the situation is one, maybe two of you are actually going to make it to the walk-on team, and that's just the reality of the situation. So I think that was really good guidance to be able to provide clear expectations, which is your job as a leader. And as a leader, your job is also to move others, to inspire others, and that's certainly what this coach did in spades. So now things are kind of heating up, and if you can believe, just really inspiring the fact that Rudy had enough balls, okay, to finally push through, get accepted, and then walk on the scout team, which he has statistically absolutely zero chance at playing and very little chance of actually making the walk-on team. But really good leadership and expectation setting from the coach, which is something that I try to, even when the outlook is bleak, I try to shoot my team straight, and that's really, really important from leadership. You want to be able to showcase the vision and inspire people, but also to, be real and raw and authentic with them, and that, my friend, is good leadership.
You think you made it?
Look at that, Rudy. Holy smokes. Have this dream, this vision of enrolling yourself in the University of Notre Dame and making the football team when you are not strong academically, when you're 5 foot and weigh 100 pounds soaking wet, is just an absolutely incredible dream. And as it turns out, in this particular clip, it became a reality. So when I break this down, number one, Rudy did an incredible job up to this point of leading himself. So I think that's really, really important to understand. From any team that you're on, and you as a leader, you need to be able to lead yourself before you can lead your family and empire. The second thing I want to dive into is the way the coach actually provided that, good news that he made the scout team. And really, in this particular film, it's not like he's made the starting lineup where he's going to be playing. He literally just made the team, the practice team, so that way he can get beat up and really practice with the real players. Unfortunately, though, there's not enough spots on the actual real team, but he made the scout team, which is a huge, huge thing in this particular situation. But how the coach gave him that insight, he actually asked him a question. He's like, Rudy, do you think you can give the same effort, what you've been doing over the next handful of months? And then, of course, Rudy's like, game on, I'm in. He's a super determined guy. And that's really, really an effective strategy when you're leading people. It's called commitment and consistency. It's a weapon of influence. So when you get someone's commitment, just like the coach did, hey, Rudy, do you think you will be able to give that same effort over the next handful of months? Of course, Rudy says yes. And really that's strong. It's a strong tool in persuasion to get someone's commitment, because in this case, Rudy's going to want to stay consistent with that commitment, which is a human nature tug that we all experience. So a very, very effective leadership tool that the coach did. And the last thing that I wanted to share, and this is kind of future pacing, but it's more of a cautionary tale on a false sense of leadership. And I feel like so many young leaders, they think, okay, they're going to get into this particular leadership role. They're going to work really hard. They're going to get the position. And once they get the position, they're going to be able to kick back, put their hands and feet up, and just chill. And the fact of the matter is, my friends, that is not leadership. In fact, the opposite is true. When you get that position, the work actually starts. In fact, if you're looking to be an ivory tower leader where you're going to be up in the tower barking orders to your team, that is just not going to happen. In fact, when you work so hard to hustle, to launch your business, to get in a position where then you have a team to support you, it's at that point in time where you are in the low end of the totem pole. You are serving your team. You are in the trenches. So this is a great example as Rudy just got the good news. He made the scout team, but also too a cautionary tale for me, and something I've seen so many times from young leaders is when they get what they're after, then they put their foot on the brake or at least off the gas, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Get out! I can do it, coach!
Alrighty, so as we continue on the film, it's kind of settling in. Rudy has made the scout team, and as you can see from the clip, the first few minutes of the clip, Rudy is just getting his butt pounded in, and that is just a good metaphor for business ownership, for entrepreneurship, for leadership. And Many times leadership, even though in entrepreneurship and business ownership, it has this glamorous kind of sexy appeal on the front end. And certainly there are perks of the role, but I feel like most times the perks, they're not that strong. In fact, a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you're getting your teeth kicked in, just like Rudy. And there's many examples of this. I mean, I think, this is 2024 already. It's been a few years since COVID hit our door, and it seems to be an afterthought. But I remember from a franchise perspective, during the months of March through probably the following 6 months intensively, there was just a series of bad news after bad news. This state shutting down, this governor restricting and putting draconian lockdowns on this particular, set of business ownership. And it was just one thing after the other. We had fires, we had riots, and certainly if you're watching this, you can follow along with that and you experience that as well. But that is just part of business and leadership. In fact, looking at my local location, my most profitable location, which is my one location that I have right now in the brand, getting that thing off the ground, I ran into so many issues with permitting, with cities and building construction. Got everything sorted, launched the business, was good to go, then decided the landlord reached out to me a few years later with an opportunity to move from upstairs to downstairs, which a bigger space and actually an equal amount of rent, which is a huge win. So very, very excited at that. But then come to find out a few months later, came in one day and found a pink slip on the door from the city of Mission Viejo saying that unfortunately the landlord made the move, not done properly in terms of code, etc. And unfortunately, I was going to have to close down my business. And if you can believe, I had enough passion and savviness and kind of Rudy's mentality to not take that for an answer. Ended up, it was a 6-month period. Went in front of the board at Mission Viejo City Council, pled my case on why I should have the business and why everything was going to be done to code, et cetera, and that there was an oversight from the landlord. This all to say, was able to sort the situation. And, I think that's just a good understanding, a good lesson for leadership. Many times you're going to feel as a leader, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, like just like Rudy getting your teeth kicked in, it's going to be more of a constant that is not. So get ready, buckle up. It's going to be a good ride.
Up. And every year we're competing for the national championship.
All right, look at that. After getting kicked in the teeth time and time again, there's another glistening light of hope. And as you can see from the breakdown, Rudy goes and connects with his coach with an ask. His ask is if he can dress for one game next year. And I love this because this is strong leadership. When you're in business and you're an entrepreneur, especially from a salesperson perspective, and you're in persuasion because you need to be able to sell your program, you're not going to get any yeses unless you ask. And yes, there's going to be times where you ask and the answer is going to be no. Dealing with rejection, this is just part of life. But I think this is a really good soundbite from the movie that you have to ask for what you want and you need to be persistent about it. So good on Rudy for showing up that way. Another thing I love about this is there's no 8th place trophies, and love this. I'm going to go on a freaking rant right now because I feel like in today's age, especially over the last few years, there's all this BS about, hey, you get an 8th place or 9th place trophy, and the fact of the matter is that's not how life works, okay? Life in business is tough, okay? It only rewards success and excellence, and that's a message that I want to showcase to you and all of our society for that matter. So the fact that this coach, understands the fact that he has a limited amount of squad, even though Rudy has a lot of heart and drive, there's hesitancy there because in the case that something bad happens with the normal squad, there's only a certain amount of reserves. And if Rudy gets the call, that potentially puts him in a vulnerable situation. Now, that all in mind, while that can be true, as it turns out, Rudy, from a persistence perspective, he will not be denied. He has that determination, which you need as a business owner, which you need as a leader, which you need as an entrepreneur. So I love that tenacity in Rudy. And as he dialogues with his coach more, as it turns out, his coach is like, okay, cool. While I do have some concern, at the end of the day, I love your heart. I love your drive. And probably from an inspirational perspective, gave Rudy the nod to say, hey, next year we'll allow you to dress in one game. So there's a lot of positive takeaways. Now I'm going to fast forward because this is one of my favorite films that inspires me. It's been a while since I've actually watched it in its entirety, but also know that in the film, while this particular coach gives Rudy the green light, as it turns out, the following season, there's a new coach, which changed the script. So from a leadership perspective, my one critique from the coach should have been, when communicating to Rudy that you're going to give him the commitment, he should say, barring anything unforeseen, as long as I'm your coach, I will go ahead and make it my mission to put you on the squad. But there are things outside of my control, but that's my vision, and we'll reassess next year. So that would have probably been a better approach, because unfortunately, he didn't lay that down, and a new coach got brought in, and then the situation changed. From a leadership perspective, that's hard to manage that expectation. So that would be me being critical, even though I love the decision and love the acknowledgement that the coach has given the green light. I would have framed that differently from a leadership lens.
Sorry, man.
So this clip is pretty dramatic as the intensity of the movie is picking up, and Rudy was promised by the previous coach in the last clip to be able to start in one of the games in his senior year, or not start, forgive me, just show up. So keep in mind, in this whole film, Rudy is the underdog, right? He's working so hard just to get in the university to fulfill his dreams, and then he works hard just to get the scout team. And he's on the scout team, which is really, he's not playing on Saturdays. He's just practicing with the A squad to get them better. And the last year, his coach in the previous clip promised him that he could suit up and show up, not play, but literally just wear the uniform and be at a game. So that's what the scene is culminating. And every single week he goes into, the, I guess, main room where the starting lineup is, or all the people that need to dress for the game, who make the team, if you will, for that week. Their names are listed, and week in and week out, Rudy does not see his name. So, from a filmmaker's perspective, they do a good job of building suspense. So every single week he goes to the board, looks at his name or looks at the roster. Unfortunately, his name isn't there, so you're hopeful but then disappointed. So that's kind of the essence of the clip. When I break it down from a business, entrepreneurship, leadership lens, I'm going to start with a positive, but then there's a lot of negative, and there's a lot of big opportunity for Rudy here, because he does unfortunately demonstrate some poor leadership. But what he does well is when you're the hardest worker in the room, you inspire others, and his teammates clearly take notice. So the guy at the very end, who's also on the scout team, whose dad was a quarterback in Notre Dame, and he has no chance at playing, he gets frustrated with Rudy, and he says, at the very end, everything you did or said is bullshit. Now, I'll get to that specific line and breakdown in a second, but really, he inspired his, fellow teammate for being the hardest worker in the room. As you saw, a couple of the other starters as well were sympathetic and empathetic. Hey, Rudy, man, sorry. They wanted him to be on that team as well. So there's some positives there. When you work hard, when you're passionate about things, your team see that. People take notice, and they'll rally around you. So that's the positive here. But the huge opportunity for Rudy here, and we all have moments of weakness, but you need to be able to lead yourself, and you're going to have disappointment. And, Rudy, to his credit throughout the film, just keeps on getting back up. But unfortunately, he quit. He had a moment of weakness and just gets upset and frustrated. And his teammate, going back to the initial line, or the line at the very end of the clip, says, everything you did or said is bullshit. And sadly, that's truth. And I can understand why he felt that in a way, because as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you can never make a permanent decision, aka I quit, I'm removing myself from the team, on temporary feelings. And we can all understand why Rudy is frustrated, why he's disappointed, how much heart and soul and the commitment that his previous coach made. But at the end of the day, you cannot bail on your team. You cannot make a permanent decision off temporary feelings. So, Mr. Rudy, I love you, dude, but there's a big opportunity here to better lead yourself, lead your family, and in this case, lead your team.
What you doing here? Don't you have practice?
Not anymore. I quit.
Alrighty, so this clip, the intensity is building, and it's a sheer sense of frustration you feel from Rudy as, he quit. He thought this was not fair. He was promised one thing, and it unfortunately wasn't delivered upon. I'm going to showcase a lot of positivity, though, in this particular clip, because the tide changed. He comes back, and he really gets a great pep talk from kind of his unassuming mentor, if you will, who was the maintenance guy in the field that he'd been working with and helped him out throughout the course of the movie. I'm going to start out with some constructive feedback, and of course, it's from the movie's perspective, so they're building drama. I have to understand that, but I think there's some good learning lessons we can glean from this particular experience, and a good cautionary tale, which I also showcased in the last clip. But the fact of the matter is, and this is straight from the movie, if you quit, especially if you're playing D1 athlete or in a business, okay, in your working career, if you quit your team, especially in dramatic fashion, you're not going to have a reception like that. So from a leadership perspective, you would have lost so much leadership capital. So I want to point this out, of course, at the very end of the clip when Rudy comes back after getting the pep talk. Everyone's fired up and the music is there. But in life, in reality, that would have not happened. When he quit, when he resigned from the team, his team, high probability, including the coaches, and rightfully so, would have not accepted him back with open arms in that particular fashion. And that's a cautionary tale to, again, never make permanent decisions, okay, off short-term temporary feelings. So that's my constructive piece of feedback there. In terms of the good, I mean, great leadership from, his fellow maintenance person who was giving him some guidance. And he, again, shared a story to inspire Rudy. He actually got on him and was pretty, candid in his frustration and disappointment with Rudy. He started out the scene saying, "You're not the quitting type," because, again, Rudy wasn't. He has a lot of heart and drive. And for, his colleague and his friend and mentor, if you will, unassuming mentor, if you will, to be able to showcase that feedback was really powerful, and it really lit a fire within Rudy. But what was more important is that facts and data tell, but stories sell. And in this particular exhibit, he shared his own vulnerable story. As it turns out, Rudy had no idea that, his colleague, if you will, his unassuming mentor, who used to be a player for University of Notre Dame back in the day, and was frustrated, thought it was a color situation. That wasn't or because of the color of his skin, that's the reason that he wasn't playing. And as it turns out, he showed from a vulnerability and also a regretful perspective, he should have never quit. He should have never thrown in the towel. And by connecting and showing vulnerability and showcasing his story, it inspired Rudy. It inspired Rudy to realize that, shit, okay, maybe I made the bad decision. He also put things in perspective. He's like, dude, Rudy, you're 5'0", weigh 100 and nothing, and you've made the University of Notre Dame scout team. You don't have to prove anyone to anyone. And I think for me, that also struck a chord because, in my early youth, my father walked out of the relationship, walked out of our house and bailed on our family. And, from that perspective, I think for a long time, it created rage and frustration and really, I guess, frustration and disappointment would be the best way to describe it. And thankfully, I turned that viewpoint. Instead of saying, poor me, I turned that frustration, I channeled it towards the positive, and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and dominate. I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to prove something, prove the world that I'm worthy. And I think for a long time, I was trying to prove my father that I was worthy. And then I realized one day, and this is over a decade ago, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. And Rudy kind of had this big aha that the perspective was given by his unassuming mentor. So there's a lot of good leadership takeaways. I also want to be able to provide that visibility. But great clip, and certainly had some Hollywood theatrics to it, but some good learning lessons that we just uncovered.
I want Rudy to dress in my place, Coach. He deserves it.
All right, so as we're kind of concluding the movie, or at least building towards the climax, this scene, the most successful, the captain, the All-American, all the starting lineup for University of Notre Dame addressed the coach. And because the coach was resistant to put Rudy on the team that day, or the final game of the year against Georgia State, or Georgia Tech, I should say, as it turns out, his players, his fellow teammates, offer up their spot, okay, for Rudy in exchange for Rudy to be on that field. And that's an incredible learning lesson and takeaway. And I think for me, when you are the hardest worker in the room, when you lead through determination, through grit, when you are a teammate that will stop at nothing, that determination, it's contagious. And when you're the hardest worker in the room, you inspire other people. And that's my call to action from an entrepreneur and a leadership perspective. And there's a lot of different strategies and tools that you need to be able to acquire to develop your leadership skills. But one of the biggest and the best ways for me is through moral authority, through leading by example. I look at myself yourself as like, I as the leader am the model that I want all my teammates to work after. And for me, how am I going to expect a teammate, okay, to show up, okay, to execute and work harder than me? It's just not going to happen. So when I lead first, when I'm the hardest worker in the room, when I have this mentality that I'm going to have a do what it takes mentality from a determination perspective, that creates influence, that inspires others, and that creates a teamwork environment. And we saw that in spades here in this particular scene when all of the starting players, including the All-Americans, are willing to give up their jersey, their spot for Rudy. And the last bullet point that I wanted to showcase, there's strength in numbers. This is why I love leadership, because there's teamwork, there's power in unity, there's power in force, there's power in focus and collaboration. And when you can surround yourself with an awesome team, in this particular case, the unity of the team had more influence than the coach, than vice versa. And I think that that's a really big golden learning lesson from a leadership lens.
You all know what you have to do.
All right, here we go. As we're building up to the climax, that last minute or clip or so is really the preparation before the game. And I look at this from a few different ways. The separation is always in the preparation. So entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders that prepare the most, guess what? They have the most success in the results. So there's something to be said about the separation is in the preparation, which the team is doing here. And the last thing from an ownership and an entrepreneurial perspective, and more specifically a leadership perspective, is the head coach here is kind of rallying the troops, if you will. And I think there's probably an opportunity for a more passionate, kind of fired up speech. But as you can see right here, when he got the team ready to go, they all got fired up and cheered in the same way, and they're ready to attack Georgia Tech in the film. So I think the learning lesson is you need to be able to inspire those around you. And the coach did a decent job, could have done better, but for the film, they felt inspired. But there's certain times where you're down on your luck, or you've unfortunately went through a lot of obstacles and challenges, and maybe the team morale is pretty low. It's your duty, obligation, and responsibility as a leader to bring everyone up, to inspire them. And it's great if you can be a great orator and continue to develop your communication skills, but really a lot of it comes down to heart and passion. You have heart, when you have passion, people can feel that, they can sense that, and they can rally around it, which is really important in an entrepreneurial and leadership journey. Boom! The grand finale, Notre Dame for the win. Rudy finishes off. Not only does he get it at the very end of the game, but makes a tackle based off a true story. It actually happened in real life. When the credits finish, they kind of give some verbiage of actually how everything went down in real time. But incredible finale to the film. The reality of this situation, though, it's a film, right? And granted, it was based off a true story, but sometimes there's not happy endings. And the lesson around that as an entrepreneur is you got to celebrate the good. You got to enjoy the good, but you also have to learn from the bad. And this is just part of life. And the learning lessons are going to make you better. The challenges are going to make you better. You learn from them and you move forward. You also have to inspire others. And Rudy did an incredible job of leading with work ethic, leading with inspiration, leading with heart. And I think from a passion perspective, that's why I've been successful in my career. Whatever I put my mind to, or whatever I focus in, I'm passionate about. I would not get into something I'm not passionate about. I'm passionate about leadership. I'm passionate about business ownership. I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm passionate about fitness. And that, clearly bleeds through, as we heard and saw from this particular inspiring film. So to put a bow on it, there's always not a grand finale where sun shines and rainbows. Many times there are in business, but sometimes not. You celebrate the good, you learn from the bad, you keep moving forward, but with heart, with determination, with passion, and that's the sense of an entrepreneur, that's the sense of a business owner, and that is the spirit of a leader. All right, friends, well, I hope you enjoyed this particular leadership breakdown, which is new in the series of the Fitness CEO podcast, but really to take a step back so we can be inspired and also give you some, tactical takeaways on the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of business, leadership, and life. And sports really does a great job of highlighting those things that we can take away, we can glean those lessons and apply them into our business. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give this a thumbs up and like the video. That way we can keep producing this awesome content for free. And would love to hear your biggest takeaways in the comments. So if you want to drop down maybe your biggest one or two takeaways, that would really give me insight, and that way we can engage. And I'd love to hear hear from you if you want us to continue to do these leadership breakdowns. So that's all for now. And as I sign off today, remember that no one is coming to save you. You must save yourself, and the time is now. We'll see you in the next episode.